sitting down. So today's a bit different, obviously, with Haywood on officiating a funeral down in Orlando. I've taken over morning prayer and preaching this morning. Let us start by hearing these words of St. Chrysostom. Faith needs a generous and vigorous soul, one rising above all things of sense and passing beyond the weakness of human reasonings. For it is not possible to become a believer otherwise than by raising oneself above the common customs of the world. Faith is a complex thing. The Greek term for faith is meant as a commitment, either to one another, to oneself, or to God. Faith is well established and well defined in our passage from Hebrews 11 this morning. I want to give a brief introduction to the epistle, as it doesn't often come up in the lectionary. The main focus I'll share are the modern interpretations of setting, authorship, and audience. The current idea is that this book's author is unknown. Though thought to be Paul in the early centuries of the church, modern biblical studies has helped us discern that it is more likely that an author's unknown sermon has been delivered to us. On audience, the letter does not give away its audience. Though it begins as a letter to the Hebrews, this is a vague statement, but context clues lead me to side with the large side of the debate that says the audience was of Jewish Christian origin. The letter is overflowing with hints that require an understanding of Judaism in the 1st and 2nd centuries, such as today's passage mentioning Abraham and Sarah, with very little explanation of the underlying story at hand. I wish I had a better segue for this point, but I want to go back to understanding faith. That's my main topic I want to get to today. Faith is complex. One theologian talked about this passage and said that faith is a multifaceted reality with strange and even paradoxical features. Born in a revelatory event, it is at once a gift of God's unconditional love and a human response of trust and gratitude that issues in deeds of love and justice. I would take this further and say that faith also helps us cope with life's uncertainties and all its harsh realities. Faith is a human response of trust in the divine in the face of unspeakable injustice, pain, and suffering. So how do we live by faith? As I said earlier, faith is often a commitment. In Hebrews 11, it is a commitment to God. And I would argue that our gospel reading today speaks also to that idea. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Having faith in God is a commitment to giving alms, and also a commitment that is counter to the human desire to be afraid and hold on to everything we have with white, bloody knuckles. To put faith in God is to put faith in the non-perishable treasures of heaven, not those things here that we hold on to so dearly. As the old saying goes, you can't take it with you. So what does faith in the midst of adversity look like? The disciples certainly had faith in the midst of adversity. Their faith involved adversity constantly, every step of the way. Take the idea that many of them were fishermen. Their only livelihoods that they laid down to follow Christ. So how does it look for us in the 21st century, in a post-Christendom environment, to have faith? As many of you know, I spent this summer doing clinical pastoral education in Charlottesville at UVA. In a 10-week program, chaplain interns do 100 plus hours of classroom curriculum and 300 plus hours of clinical work with patients in the hospital. Now, as you know, I spent a chunk of my time this summer at my own hospital stay, and I'm currently on dialysis, meaning I did not get the full number of hours, impeding my time significantly, leading to only a half unit of CPE by accreditation standards. However, I still spent approximately 150 to 200 hours with patients and nurses in our healthcare facilities. I spent a majority of my time on the inpatient neurology floor, though I did a couple of 24-hour on-calls. Needless to say, faith in the face of adversity is what my summer was all about. Now, not all patients were religious or even spiritual, and many just needed emotional support in tough times, which is a perfectly reasonable expectation, and in fact, the job of chaplains is not to bring faith where it is not needed. However, a moderate amount of patients wanted to discuss their faith and their faith journeys. In discussing their faith, I learned a few things from these patients. First, faith is not some grand act of praise and thanksgiving. Faith in adversity is not something deeply intense. Sometimes it is, such as in the face of death or end-of-life conversations. But many patients just, as one patient put it, held on to their faith and kept their head up to get them through difficult situations. I don't think I need to lecture much on this subject to you all. One only need to look to the back of the bulletin, to the prayer list, to see that Fort Church understands adversity. Even your beloved preachers on that prayer list today. It's tough for many of us here now. We're all wearing masks. COVID is still happening. But faith in that commitment, that's what we must hold on to get by. The first part of the passage from Hebrews draws me in, and I hope it draws you in as well. Faith is assurance. Not even just the rest of that sentence. Just those three words provide something I cannot begin to describe. I'm sure this passage provokes similar emotions in many of you. I'm not here to say faith is a quick cure by any means, but one must also realize that other people in this world are also incredibly important. Support systems, doctors and nurses, and the like. But in terms of our spiritual health, faith and community of faith, these are a balm to a world where pain and suffering are most certainly present in our lives. One thing about faith is its ability to be a pillar in our lives. If you look at the root of the word for believed in today's Genesis passage, it means pillar, support for a house or a home. Now, it's not a pillar that's the only thing holding up the roof, but it certainly is one of those pillars that provides support for the whole roof so that we can get around to figuring out how to clean up the mess underneath it. In doing my research for this sermon, I came across a poem written on a wall in a ghetto in Warsaw during World War II. The poem goes like this. I believe in the sun, even if it does not shine. I believe in love, even if I do not feel it. I believe in God, even if I do not see him. I would encourage you to see that faith is not always a fully tangible and realized thing we can hold on to like a book, but rather that trust that we have in God is that God is. I often had patients who proclaimed faith even though they even blamed the divine for their troubles. They would say, why has God done this to me? And in the next breath, tell me how strong their faith was. I think that's key. Having questions or being angry or being upset at the divine is a perfectly reasonable response to the world we live in. But so long as faith remains, I feel we have come to a point where we are going to be okay. Faith may not look the same now as it did yesterday or a month ago or 10 years ago or even when we were kids. But as Because I told a patient on one of my last days who talked to me about his faith journey, he was saying that nothing's going to be the same after his injury. Well, nothing was going to be the same, but it's about how you